So a couple of just practical thoughts about these things then, just to add to those things that have already been mentioned. One of the things to be conscious of is at the commissioning stage, if we're being told that something is a ubiquitous sort of good, or it's too good to be true, then we probably do need to be cautious about, well, what does that mean? Where would it be if there was too much of it or too little of it? What would I expect to see? And I don't think we maybe always think that through at the point of commissioning. At the point of commissioning, the development and in the implementation, that constant awareness, and I think this does go back, John, to that point that you sort of raised there, that constant awareness and vigilance about, well, what should I be starting to see? Am I seeing that? And am I seeing unintended consequences to this thing? And if we've been clear at the beginning of scoping out, what would too little or too much look like? Then we can be prepared to spot it as it occurs. One of the things in evaluation is that depending on how evaluation is done, it can often give us an inaccurate picture, particularly if there's an inverse U at play. So sometimes I talk about being mean about the mean, which is the mean is completely meaningless unless we know what the range is, and unless we know what the pattern looks like that sits behind that mean. And so an inverse U will give you a perfectly beautiful mean score on something in an evaluation. The problem is that you don't realize that it's on its direction to either being too much or too little. So again, being very careful about the mean, very circumspect about it. I think this is sort of partly been touched on, iterative evaluation. So not waiting to evaluate at the end. Endpoint evaluation means that we will find out that we did too little or too much, but it doesn't give us that agility to respond and react as we're going. And context does matter. So just because the thing that we're implementing is meant to work really well in terms of the aviation industry or the health service or somewhere else, it might not mean that it necessarily will work in the same way in the environment that we're trying to apply it to. So at the point of commissioning, being really careful about, okay, so this thing is probably a good thing, but actually how confident should we be about the likelihood of it having a positive impact in the context that we were actually trying to apply it to? Being very clear, this was touched on, clear about the indications of success, but also thinking about what the underpinning mechanisms might be. I think it's one of the things that we're keen to look at is what are the success indicators. But unless we understand what the underpinning mechanisms to that success look like, we can struggle to sometimes replicate them or struggle to understand why something has gone over and gone into too much or is not quite delivered in that it's been too little. And finally, the idea of being clear about what the evidence base is on which we are implementing something, and not therefore just assuming that it will work in another context. This is something about sort of exploring where the thinking is coming from, collaborating, getting more of those voices as people were talking about throughout the commissioning, the development, the implementation, and the evaluation to make sure whatever we're doing is not either too little or too much.